Hey guys, it's so good to be live with you. Well, we're going to talk about another topic YouTube doesn't want me to talk about, but we're going to talk about fertility uh, after the pandemic. So now that a lot of people got the needle in the arm, we're getting some data on fertility, and a lot of people have questions. There were rumors about whether the needle would affect fertility. We're far enough into 2022 that we can look at some real data. So if we go back, it was April 2021 that the needle was really widely accessible to any American who wanted it, as well as globally. And so 9 months, you got to fast forward 9 months from there, and that would be January 2022. So the first births since the needle was widely available are just in 2022, January through now. So we can actually look at some of those initial numbers and see now that a lot of people have had the needle, whether fertility is being affected at all. It's very interesting. I'm going to show you the data on that. Turns out it has. There's been an interesting drop in fertility in various nations across the globe. And when you go back over the years, there's never been quite a drop like this. So it's really interesting. I'm going to show you. Friends of mine had been asking me about this and wondering what to do because, I'd have friends call me over the past year and be like, "You're a reporter. Tell me the facts on this. My bosses are pushing me to get the needle because, they're gonna fine me." Bosses were literally taking money out of people's paycheck if they didn't get the needle. So my friends were really upset, but they heard these rumors that it might affect fertility, and they're millennial women who want to reproduce, and they're like, "So what should I do, Ivory?" And I was like, "Well, data is really limited, but there were some initial studies on rats that didn't look too good, and we don't know a whole lot yet because it's soon." Well, now we're getting more data, and I don't want to be doom and gloom about this report because I think that, the human immune system is a wonderful thing that you can nurture your immune system and you can overcome whatever has happened to you from getting the needle. Okay. So I'm just saying, looking at some of these numbers, some people have already been just fine. I know people who've gotten the needle and then got pregnant, or even got the needle while pregnant and had a successful childbirth. So this is not like, an end of the world sort of situation, like you'll never have a kid, but there was a drop in fertility that we're going to talk about. Before I get into it, just shout out to the sponsor of my coverage, preparewithivory.com. Now's the time to get an emergency food supply. My link down below for My Patriot Supply is going to get you a discount of $150 off a 3-month supply of emergency food. That is breakfast, lunch, dinner, snacks every day for 3 months. If you look at the cost of groceries for 3 months, this stockpile that they're selling down below is a pretty good deal, actually, especially when you lock in my discount. So hit my link in bio, preparewithivory.com. It is going to be very valuable to have if there's ever a shortage, which we are in strange times right now. And we've seen some shortages of certain supplies. So link down below, preparewithivory.com, for the nation's prominent emergency food supplier, which is My Patriot Supply. Okay, so you guys, this is the era of independent journalism. Let me tell you, the corporate news is not covering this topic, despite the fact that many people have a lot of questions on whether this fertility thing is true. So where do we have to turn? Substack journalists who are doing their independent research. Substack is the way. So I'm not going to link to the New York Times today. I'm going to link to Substack and shout out this amazing independent journalist who conducted journalism the way you should, by citing every source, hyperlinking exactly to the government data so we can see exactly what's going on. So shout out to, I don't even know how to say it, Kanakoa's newsletter, linking all the government data to show exactly what's happening. I have linked their article down in my description. Now let's talk about it. So we're talking about the needle and infertility. Why are birth rates plummeting in the United Kingdom, Germany, Sweden, Netherlands, Switzerland, and Taiwan 9 months after mass needles? Let's talk about it. So the author writes first about Germany. Germany reported a 13% decline in births between January and March of 2022 compared to the same period in 2021. I am going to show you the graphic details on this, the graphs going back over the years, back to 2016. They've never seen anything like this. It's a sudden, absolute jump down for 2022. Okay, United Kingdom reported a 7.7% decline in births, with 75,000 births between January and February 2022 compared to 82,000 births during the same period in 2021. Okay, let me make a quick note that birth rate has been steadily declining every year. Okay, so a decline in birth rate is not something shocking at all, but this is a bigger decline in birth rate that we're seeing. In Switzerland, they note, in Switzerland, birth rates have also plummeted since the introduction of the needle. And the graph on that is quite stunning too, because over the past few years, it's just been very steady. And then all of a sudden, boom, lower numbers in all of the months of 2022 so far than in any of the months of the previous years back to 2016. Taiwan reported a 23% decline in births in May 2022 compared to the same month in 2021. 23% decline, that's pretty stunning. Igor Chudov, the author of a popular newsletter, wrote, quote, when expressed in sigmas, units of standard deviation, the 23% drop in the birth rate in Taiwan is a 26 sigma event. This can be described as unimaginable in terms of the likelihood of happening due to random chance. So if you factor in random chance, the chance that the birth rate dropped that low in Taiwan is just absolutely stunning. It just doesn't make any sense. This is 2022. We've heard about, more people decided not to have kids when the pandemic started. But no, this is a, much lower number than in 2020 and 2021. Okay, so this is not due to the start of the pandemic. Okay, that would have reduced, if people decided to pause on having kids due to the pandemic in 2020, that would have reduced birth rate in 2021. But this is a dramatic drop in 2022. So something else is going on. In Sweden, without lockdown and school closures, reported a 6.6% decline, with 35,000 births between January and April 2022 compared to 37,000 births during the same period in 2021. The decline in birth rate is 6.9% for that same time period when compared with the average of 2019 to 2021. Okay, so it is a drop. Netherlands reported a 6.3% decline, with 53,000 births between January and April of 2022 compared to 56,000 births during the same period in 2021. In conclusion, data from around the world shows a substantial monthly decrease in birth rate from January 2022 to April of 2022 compared to previous years. Okay, up to May and June. We're getting too recent. We don't have that data yet. But really stunning initial data that we're seeing right now, especially out of Taiwan. I want to show you the data out of Germany and Switzerland. So this is let me just bring these numbers. I'm being careful about what I'm showing you guys on the screen because this is a taboo topic on YouTube, but I think it'll be okay. So the Swiss research, they looked at Deutschland, which is Germany, and Switzerland. Everything's written in German because that's the language of Switzerland and Germany. And you can see right here the initial data on childbirth for 2022, that's in red, is dramatically lower than anything we've seen going back to 2016. It follows these seasonal trends every year with births peaking in the late summer every year, you can see. But it always dips during the winter. But we saw an unusual sharp dip. Especially if you look from December of 2021, that last blue line, to January of 2022, monstrous dip in births. Now, again, that is right after, January would be 9 months after April, which is when the needle was finally available to everybody. And in America, people were just lining up in droves to get the needle in April. Everyone was just clamoring for that needle in April. And then we see this dramatic drop. So I'm just wondering if it's not associated, it might not be associated with the needle, but if it's not, then what is it associated with? Because there were reports that, in 2020, people changed their pregnancy plans. Women said, women who were planning to get pregnant, because in modern days, people usually plan this out. It's not an accident. And so women put those plans on hold and said, I'm going to keep doing birth control until I'm ready, which is when this chaos of the world ending stops. Because in March of 2020, everything locked down. It felt like the world was ending. And a lot of women said, screw it, I'm not going to try to have a kid right now because I lost my job or my husband lost my job or his job. So anyway, so you could see why that upheaval in 2020 could lead to a lower birth rate in 2021. Yet 2021 in Germany here, with Deutschland, you don't see that drop. I believe it did happen, in the US, but not in Germany. You instead see the drop immediately after the masses went to get the needle. Okay, I'm going to show you the Swiss data as well now from the same sheet. And again, all of this information, including the stuff I'm not able to show on YouTube due to their censorship algorithm, it's all linked in this beautiful Substack article, which I have linked down in my description. This is the Swiss data, and it's very similar. You can see that red data there is dramatically lower. The red is 2022, the blue next to it is 2021, and you see green is 2020, going all the way back, it's very even, and then there's a big drop in 2022, after 9 full months after everyone got the needle. So what's going on with that? The United Kingdom, publishing.services.gov.uk, all of this data we're citing is directly from the government agencies of these various nations, all nations that have been pushing the needle on people. So these nations would have an incentive to make it look like there wasn't anything wrong with fertility associated with the needle. But yet these numbers are coming straight out of those nations. And the United Kingdom was actually tracking overall needle coverage in women giving birth by month of delivery. They were tracking this data to see, how pregnant women fare as far as how effective the needle is, whether you're pregnant or not. And in them collecting all this data, we can see exact numbers on fertility. And you can see that in February, it was all in the 40,000s, women giving birth, 40,000 women giving birth, up to 47,000 women giving birth each month. But then it goes down into 30s in January 2022 and then February 2022. So 39,000 births in January, 36,000 births in February, and then we don't have further data yet. So this is all still developing. And then the Taiwanese health department, Taiwan, they also, I wish I could show you their website, but it is hyperlinked. So go check that out. But it says there were 9,000 babies born in May 2022, which decreased 23% compared with the same month last year. So same month each year. So it factors in the seasonal ebb and flow, yet it's a 23% drop. The average showed that a baby was born about every 4 minutes. The annual crude birth rate was 4%. And that is ris.gov.tw. So the Taiwanese government official data. So what is going on? We've also got, Sweden's official government data. So I don't know. What's your take? Oh, we got a super chat. We overturned Roe versus Wade right when there's a mysterious global drop in birth rate. Have fun with that thought. Yeah, so Roe versus Wade, Roe versus Wade led to decreases in childbirth, right? Because people were able, if they didn't want to have a kid, they could nip that pregnancy in the bud, right? Kill a baby. So there was a lower birth rate. So getting rid of Roe versus Wade would theoretically increase the birth rate. So Jay, thanks for the super chat. Are you implying that they're trying to rebound the birth rate to compensate for the needle? What are you saying? I don't know, but thanks for that super chat. What's up, guys? I'm reading your comments. Okay, so I was looking at U.S. data because, we're looking at all these foreign nation data, but what about our own country in the U.S.? And it's really interesting that the CDC actually is really limited on that information. Actually, let's bring up the CDC's website on births. And you can see it only goes up to 2020, talking about a birth rate of 11 per 1,000. Their most current data on their birth tab is only up to 2020, but I want to show you guys the birth rate over the years. You can see how birth rate continually goes down. And here it is. So this is cdc.gov as well. The birth rate, the crude birth rate in 1950 in the US was 24. Birth rate in 2018 was only 11 per 1,000. Used to be 24 babies per 1,000. So it's every year you can see it dropping. Apparently it went up a little bit in 2014 compared to 2013, but it's still dropped after that, So, it's steadily going down, and that has to do with, I think, people's lifestyles, people becoming career women, and all of this. I want to show you some information about from the United Nations, and talking about population control and things. So you can see the fertility. This is world fertility right here. And you can see it dropped dramatically from the late 60s down to the 2000s. There was a huge drop in fertility. And I think that had to do with the whole movement of feminism and women becoming career women, because prior to that, back in the 1950s, women were like more stay-at-home moms. And it was like their job to have the babies, and then suddenly after that it was their job to help with the income, help their husband with the income, and so having babies was less important. Anyway, so I think that's part of it. And then it just shows it shows projections into 2100. So the United Nations is predicting how things will go, and they predict a steady decline in fertility, a much more subtle decline. But this one over here is really interesting. World average annual number of births and deaths. And what you see in the projection to 2100, which is 78 years from now. So the United Nations is looking ahead. In 78 years, they predict that world births and deaths will meet. And I think this was Bill Gates' vision in that TED Talk he gave, where he talked about getting the world's population under control, because our population is growing so much, which means there's a lot more deaths, or there's a lot more births than deaths every year. So if there were more deaths than births, we wouldn't have to worry about an overpopulated world. But instead, Bill Gates is very worried about an overpopulated world, as he discussed in that TED Talk where he mentioned needles. And he said, if we can get enough needles out there, we can help with this population situation, which was really eyebrow raising to a lot of people. Like, excuse me, Bill? I thought needles were supposed to save lives, which would increase world population, but you're saying they're going to decrease world population? Anyway, so you're saying they are predicting, United Nations is predicting there's going to be a dramatic increase in deaths. You see this trend, the line go up from 2025 all the way to 2100, and deaths go way up while births slowly go down. So what does the United Nations have up their sleeves? Why do they think that all that stuff is going to happen? We have another super chat. Thank you, Stevie. Another conspiracy theory proven true and still being suppressed by big tech platforms and mainstream media. Yeah, exactly, you guys. And I haven't even gotten to the most horrifying part of this whole talk with you guys today, because I looked at some official government research out of Australia. So when one of the needle companies wanted to distribute its needle in Australia, Australia did its own scientific study on this. And they found some very interesting information. Now, this is from the Australian government, Department of Health Therapeutic Goods Administration non-clinical evaluation report. This is tga.gov.au, Australia's government website. Not a conspiracy theory, what I'm about to go through. It is also hyperlinked from the Substack article, which I've linked in my description. Okay. This is in regards to the needle company that starts with a PF. Okay. Now, you got to search through this for the key terms ovaries. And we're going to find what collects in your ovaries when you get the needle. So total tissue distribution. What the Australians broke down was a study of rats. They gave this new needle technology to the rats. It says the concentration of radioactive lipid markers reached the peak level in plasma between 1 and 4 hours post-dose, and distribution mainly into liver, adrenal glands, and spleen and ovaries over 48 hours. The concentration of radioactivity remained highest in injection site at all time points. So I don't know, why is there radioactivity associated with these lipid nanoparticles? Okay. Lipids, when we find out, we hear that these new needles have lipids in them, that sounds really natural. Oh, fatty acids, those are in our foods too. They're supposed to be good for us. Why? First of all, why is there radioactivity? There is a high level of radioactivity at the site of the needle going in. that lasted for 48 hours, as they tested over a 48-hour period. But aside from that, the primary places where this radioactivity went in your body was your liver, adrenal glands, spleen, and ovaries. Okay, they looked at male testicles too. Luckily, the testicles were okay. This substance did not seem to go for the testicles, but it did go for the ovaries. Okay, so women sucks to be y'all / us. All right, so they broke it down by into a chart by different organs in your body. The mean concentration of radioactivity on tissue and blood flowing. This is following a single dose of the needle. Again, the needle, it starts with a PF, and it was injected into a rat. Again, so this is not the reaction in humans, because we don't get to see that study where it went in the human organs. So we're left to look at rats and assume it's going to go to the same organs in our bodies too. So the radioactivity, it was very high. It breaks it down very high in the injection site, and then it appears, within the first hour after the needle goes in, that radioactivity is seen in the blood plasma, and it's increases in the blood plasma over the next 2 hours as it appears to spread throughout the body, but it goes to particular organs. And as the hours ensue, you see the level of radioactivity increase dramatically in the liver, the adrenals, the ovaries, and the spleen. Why is that? It says mean total radioactivity was greatest at the injection site, followed by the liver with much lower total recovery in spleen, adrenal glands, and ovaries. The total radioactivity recovery was less than 100% at all time points, probably due to difficulty in collecting entirety of injection site sample and the presence of radioactivity in the carcass, feces, and urine, which were not analyzed. So there was radioactivity in all parts of this rat. They're kind of concluding here. So the conclusion is slow but significant distribution of lipid nanoparticles from the site of the needle, with major uptake into the liver. Yeah, the liver was the primary organ that saw a ton of radioactivity. Minor distribution to spleen, adrenal, and ovaries over 48 hours. And by minor, they mean it's a substantially higher level of radioactivity in those organs compared to others, but still lower than liver. So what I'm saying here is, I'm just wondering, radioactivity, I don't think subjecting ovaries to radiation is going to be good for your fertility. So I'm just wondering if there's a connection here, seeing that dramatic drop in new babies being born January 2022, which is exactly 9 months after people lined up to get the needle in April of 2021. Then we see this study that shows radiation increase in the ovaries of a rat after taking the needle. So is there any connection there? So they're talking here, they say the distribution of lipid nanoparticles encapsulated. These are words that I probably shouldn't say on YouTube, but they're talking about that glowing substance from like a firefly that some religious people associate with the devil in the Bible. I'm not going to say what this is, but they talk about that they are encoding that into yourselves. Okay. The lipid nanoparticles encapsulating the new needle technology encoding that glowy stuff into you. It was investigated by monitoring of a radio-labeled lipid marker after a single injection in Winstar rats. Okay, so this is, I don't know if you're aware that this glowy stuff is being encoded into your cells. That lipid that sounds all natural, that, oh, there's lipids in my needle. I looked at the ingredients online for the needle and they look very natural, simple, and harmless. Yeah, but did you know that inside that lipid nanoparticle is this brand new stuff that we've never heard of before? And it encodes something into your body that actually, into your genes. So it was investigated when stuck into the rats. It says major uptake of the lipid marker, probably representing the lipid nanoparticles, was noted in the needle site, and liver with low distribution, spleen, adrenal glands, and ovaries distribution was not investigated in draining lymph nodes. The total radioactivity recovery was very low at all time points, possibly because the draining lymph nodes of the injection site were not collected, and feces and urine and carcass. Okay, so radioactivity recovery was very low. So there's low recovery. So radioactivity staying in their body, is that what they're saying? Now, it was very interesting. Yeah, they're talking about toxicity. So they talked about how the rats reacted afterwards, and they showed big inflammation. The rats, hair, the reaction, their backs would hunch, their hair would stick up, which showed that there was like inflammation at their hair follicles, I guess. And so the rats had a sick kind of reaction, which doctors will say, oh, it's normal and good, that means the needle's working. But then you're seeing all this radiation go to these certain organs. They talk about the toxicity. Clinical candidates, the rats received 3 doses of the needle, 7 days apart. Both studies use an adequate number. Okay, bottom line, they had a toxic reaction. Now, they did check fertility of these rats as well. And they say in this study, they studied 22 rats that were fertile. They had been having babies, and 22 rats that they had caused to be infertile. So the rats had no chance of having a baby, and they stuck the needle in all of them. And the study says that there was no effect on fertility. So they didn't break it down further than that in this study. I want to know, okay, how often were they having rat babies prior to the needle? How many rat babies were being had after the needle? They didn't break any of those numbers down. They just said there was no effect on the rat fertility, period. And then they moved right along in the study, without going to detail. But I'm just wondering, why did they study 22 rats that can't have babies anyways when you're looking at fertility? That was just a weird freaking study on rat fertility. But they're saying the rats were fine, but they are saying there was a big collection of radiation in the rats' ovaries. Now, when you look at genotoxicity, this Australian study looks at genotoxicity, which refers to the ability of harmful substances to damage genetic information in cells. I'm going to search the word genotoxicity. And it says here, Australian study on the new needle. Quote, no genotoxicity studies were conducted for this needle. This is in line with relevant guidelines for needles. Whoa. So the guidelines are that needles should not be looked at in regards to whether they affect your genes. These are just the guidelines when studying new needles, that you don't look at whether they affect your genes. Why is that? I want to know whether these needles affect your genes. So this is the most alarming part of all of it to me, is that they're saying we have zero data on whether this brand new needle, which does go in and alter your genes, on whether it negatively impacts your genes permanently. They didn't even look at that remotely. Okay, we know, I mean, it's widely known, all the mainstream agrees that it does go in and alter your genes to the point of causing them to create a spike protein that is supposed to mount an immune defense without actually catching the illness, right? So it does that much altering of the genes, at least. But the word is it's supposed to be a temporary little altering of genes, and then you move right along with your life and you're great. But they actually are saying they did not study whatsoever any sort of other effects on genes. And that is in line with relevant guidelines for studying needles. So it says, quote, there were also no genotoxicity studies with the novel excipients. The sponsor stated that the novel lipid excipients are not expected to be genotoxic based on in silico analysis of the novel lipids and their primary metabolites, reports not provided. So what they're saying here is the sponsor, and guess who the sponsor is? The needle company itself. So the needle company sponsored Australia looking at this, I guess, and said, yeah, you guys don't need to look at genes because we've already done in silico analysis, which means they ran a computer model. And according to the computer model, this new needle is not going to affect your genes. So just take our word for it and do not look at gene effects on these rats. And then it notes here that the sponsor, the needle company, did not provide reports on its computer models that it ran. So literally just taking the needle company's word for it, don't look at what happened to the rat's genes. Says, quote, the sponsor justified the absence of genotoxicity studies with the novel lipid exposures based on the threshold of toxicological concern concept. Now, when they also didn't look at carcinogenicity, guys, I'm slaughtering this word, whether it's cancerous. Let me just say that. They did not look at whether the new needle will cause cancer. They said the cancer studies were not conducted. This is acceptable based on its duration of use. The novel lipid excipient is not expected to be carcinogenic based on the low exposure, duration of exposure, absence of structure alerts for mutating. So they're saying, yeah, you're just not getting a lot of exposure to this new needle, so we don't think you'll have cancer, so we're not even going to study whether the new needle will give you cancer. And that's all really, really concerning to me. Now, yeah, they looked at the reproductive toxicity and they noted that, while we looked at reproduction in rats, we're not going to give you full details on what happened with the rats having babies after that. But we are going to say that the rats were fine to have babies after. And they also noted that rat outcome in fertility is not the same as human outcome in fertility. It's really interesting. It says here, animal studies do not indicate direct or indirect harmful effects with response to reproductive toxicity. And then they struck out that line. So I don't know why they struck out that line, but it says that, and then it's crossed out. Anyway, and so then they also talk about use in lactation, and it says it is recommended that findings of the rat study be stated. It is unknown whether the new needle is excreted in human milk. A combined fertility and developmental toxicity study in rats did not show harmful effects in offspring development before weaning. So it says that basically the baby rats were growing up just fine while nursing their needled mothers. So, but it's unclear. They said here in this study at the beginning of 2021, by the way, the study came out at the beginning of 2021 when humans were already getting the needle. And they said that we just don't know whether a mom who gets the needle, whether that needle substance goes out from her breast milk into the baby. But if you look at the CDC's bad reaction data that I broke down in my YouTube last week, you will see that indeed there have been a lot of adverse, not allowed to say that, bad reactions in kids, in babies who were nursing their mothers. So it appears that it does indeed leave the mother through the breast milk and go into the baby. The fact that they are saying do not look at gene effects, whether your genes are being altered by this new needle, is very alarming to me. And it states that right there on an official government document out of Australia, saying that document was sponsored by the needle company. And so I think that the corporate news should report that, but yet the corporate news is not reporting that. So I don't know that, that glowing substance from a firefly that some Christians associate with Satan, that is encapsulated in the lipid nanoparticles that go into your genes. That assay system is an extremely sensitive and rapid reagent for blah, 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 blah. I'm just trying to let you guys know what this is. It's a part of a firefly, but I'm reading online from Science Direct. It says that the assay is used to determine if a protein can activate or repress the expression of a target gene. So it helps you see whether the gene is indeed being affected. So these needles are targeting your actual genetics, and this substance was in the needles that were going into the rats. So I just think this is very interesting, and I want to know your thoughts on all this. I also want to show you this article from Vox, one article I am allowed to show, Vox.com, mainstream media. The increase in U.S. births in 2021 explained births went up by 1% last year, but don't think of it as a baby boom. So this article came out in May of 2022, looking at births in 2021. It has more data on births than the CDC's website is laying out right now. And it says a total of 3.6 million babies were born in the U.S. in 2021, according to new data released this week by the CDC's National Center for Health Statistics. It's a 1% more than the 3.6 million babies born in the U.S. in 2020, which means that the natal class of 2021 is now what passes for a baby boom in the United States. Indeed, 2021 represents the first time since 2014 that the number of babies born in the U.S. was actually increased, bouncing back from a pandemic year in 2020 that saw the largest one-year drop in births in nearly 50 years. The 2020 dip in births wasn't much of a surprise to demographers, despite the popular conception that events like blizzards and blackouts that keep couples homebound inevitably leads to more babies 9 months later. The lockdown of early 2020 was not particularly conducive to conceiving of children. Surveys conducted during 2020 found that as many as a third of American women changed their reproductive plans because of the pandemic, Well, as many as half of American women reported a decline in their sexual activity during those lockdowns of 2020. So, by 2021, people weren't really locked down, right? So, but here's the thing: it takes 9 months to have a baby. So this article doesn't make sense. They're saying there should, I don't know, that it makes sense that people were locked down during 2020, and that's why there was a baby boom in 2021. It's because everyone was sitting at home getting pregnant instead in 2021. So there was an unusual increase, they're saying here, in 2021. Now, the US, we just don't have the data on 2022 yet. Those first few months of 2022 will tell what happened after the needle, and we don't have that yet. It's still the US hasn't come forward with it. But here is census.gov. Looks it actually puts it in chart format here. So 2021 is the black line, and census.gov just has January through March, where you see absolutely low birth turnouts in the beginning of 2021. Now, that article is saying that the rest of the year turned out to be a baby boom. But if you look at the start of 2021, kids were not being born. You see 2020 is the red line at the bottom here. 2020 was a low birth rate year altogether, which tells me that people in 2019, people were not getting pregnant. This is before the pandemic. America's fertility issue was already going way down, and maybe it's not that women couldn't have kids, maybe they just didn't want to have kids in 2019, but for some reason the number of women getting pregnant in the US in 2019 was significantly lower than previous years when you look at how low this red line is. But when you see March would have been when the pandemic hit, and then that rate of birth is extra low and stays low going into 2021. But again, for 2022, the US, as far as I can tell, is not coming out with more current data to show us how the birth rate is panning out, since people rushed to get the needle. So what's up, guys? What's your take? Now, let me just say that just because, there's studies on male fertility, and you can, if you have a low sperm count, you can increase that sperm count simply by losing weight, for example. So I'm a very positive thinker that you can change your health outcome. You don't need to sit there and be like, oh my gosh, well, I got a needle, because they're giving away free donuts and now I'm never going to have a kid. You can work on your health and actually still get pregnant. I really feel that way. And like I said, it's not as if you got this needle, you're never going to have a kid. I know people who've had kids after getting the needle, or had the needle while they were pregnant, and their baby was born healthy. So, this is not something that is impacting everyone, but there is an unusual drop in birth rate in these countries that are coming forward with information so far. So it's just definitely something to note. Now, this article, this fantastic Substack article, goes on to talk about that. Well, they're the ones who mentioned this study out of Australia, showing that the needle lipid nanoparticles do end up going to the ovaries, and then subsequent studies showed that both the illness and the needle lowered sperm count. And this is true. This article rocks so much because it links to every study it's talking about. And in the study Andrology, the journal Andrology came out with a study about the needle temporarily impairs semen concentration and total motile count among semen donors. Study came out June 17th, 2022. And talks about Conclusion: systematic immune response after the needle is a reasonable cause for transient semen concentration and TMC decline. Long-term prognosis remains good. So it talked about the fact that, yeah, it talks right here. There was a 15% drop in sperm concentration after getting the needle, but it says that long-term prognosis is good. I think people were able to build their sperm count back up after getting the needle, but there was a big drop in sperm count after getting the needle. And this study that looks at people who had the illness says that indeed just having this new illness impacts your fertility as well. It's a semen. It was initially looking at whether semen could infect another person. So someone who got sick with the new illness and then they had sex with someone, whether that person would catch the illness just through sex. And it found out that was not the case. But in conducting that study, they noticed that your sperm count actually went down after just getting ill. Okay. But the estimated recovery time was 3 months. But further follow-up studies are underway to confirm this and to determine if there's permanent damage. So they're saying it looks like men were able again to rebuild their sperm count after 3 months, but they need more information to see if there's permanent damage from the illness. Again, an illness that more evidence coming out appears to have been created in a lab, an illness that was created in a lab and went on to reduce sperm count in certain studies. So that's really interesting to uncover as we learn more information from government data and scientific studies, information that I'm not seeing in the mainstream media. But interesting times, you guys. Look, we're seeing that definite jump down in childbirth in 2022, but there are still a lot of women still having babies in 2022. Okay, it was only a percentage who went down. It's not like everyone stopped having babies. So people are still able. There's a lot of people still able to have babies after getting the needle. Okay, I know people who are really freaking stressed out and they're like, I shouldn't have got the needle. What was I thinking? And I'm like, calm down. I think you're going to be okay. Just, tend to your health, eat healthy foods, exercise, meditate, and do wonderful things that are good for your immune system. With that being said, guys, I just wanted to update you as we get more information. The information on this topic is still pretty scarce, but I wanted to show you guys what we got so far, and it is quite interesting. More information from the author of that Substack article linked down in my description. Thanks so much, guys, for tuning in. Have a wonderful day, and we'll probably